Title: The Stormy Sea and the Lighthouse of Hope. In a time long ago, on the edge of the world, there stood a lighthouse. Its tall, white tower was a symbol of guidance, a beacon in the darkness. The lighthouse was perched upon a rugged cliff, overlooking the vast and endless stormy sea. The waves crashed against the rocks below with a deafening roar, and the wind howled like a wild beast. But no matter how fierce the storm, the light from the lighthouse never faltered. It shone brightly, guiding sailors through the tempest, offering them a glimpse of safety in the chaos of the world. But there was one sailor who had not yet seen the light. His name was Cale, a young man whose heart was heavy with loss. He had set out from a distant land, driven by a sense of purpose and a thirst for adventure. Yet, the storm that had arisen out of nowhere now threatened to consume him. His ship, battered and broken, tossed on the unforgiving waves. The wind screamed in his ears, and the sea seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. The stars had vanished behind the thick clouds, and all he could see was the relentless fury of the storm. Cale had lost everything: his ship, his crew, and now, it seemed, his very hope. He had no idea where he was, nor how he had ended up in this dreadful place. The sea, vast and impassable, seemed to have no mercy. His thoughts turned to his family, far away, and to the people who had once cared for him. He had promised them that he would return. But now, it felt as though he would never make it home. Just as his despair began to overwhelm him, something caught his eye. Through the curtain of rain and mist, he saw a faint, flickering light. It was distant, yet unmistakable. A lighthouse. He had heard tales of such beacons, guiding ships safely through the storm. His heart raced with a surge of hope, and he steered his ship toward the light, determined to reach it, no matter the cost. The storm seemed to grow fiercer with each passing moment. Waves rose like mountains, crashing against his ship with such force that Cale feared the ship would break apart. But still, he pressed on. The light, distant as it was, called to him like a promise. As he drew closer, the wind began to ease, and the storm's roar softened. The light became clearer, brighter, and more distinct. It was a powerful, unwavering beam that pierced the dark night, cutting through the storm like a sword. Cale could feel the warmth of its glow, even from this far away. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Cale's ship reached the shore. The towering lighthouse stood before him, its light a steady beacon of hope. The storm had ceased, and the calm sea spread out like a mirror beneath the sky. He stumbled ashore, exhausted, drenched, and weak from the struggle. But his heart was filled with a strange sense of peace. At the base of the lighthouse, an elderly keeper stood, his face lined with age, his eyes filled with wisdom. He had been waiting. The keeper extended a hand to Cale, his voice gentle yet firm. "You've made it," he said. "Many have lost their way, but you have found the light." Cale, still trembling from the storm's fury, took the keeper's hand. "I thought I was lost," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I thought I would never find my way." The keeper smiled, his eyes sparkling with understanding. "The sea is vast, and its storms are many. But no matter how strong the winds, or how fierce the waves, the light always shines through. It is there to guide those who seek it, even in the darkest of times." Cale gazed up at the lighthouse, its beam cutting through the night. For the first time in what felt like ages, he understood. The storm had been fierce, yes, but it had led him to this place. It had brought him to the light, to safety, to hope. The trials he had faced were not in vain. As the storm clouds parted and the first light of dawn began to break through the sky, Cale felt a new sense of purpose awaken within him. He had been lost, yes, but now he was found. The lighthouse had shown him the way, not just across the sea, but through the storms of his heart. "Thank you," Cale said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I will never forget the light." The keeper nodded. "The light is always within you, Cale. Remember that, whenever you face a storm." And so, Cale set forth once more, his heart full of hope, his path clear. For he knew that no matter how dark the storm, the lighthouse of hope would always be there to guide him. Days passed as Cale stayed at the lighthouse, recovering from the storm that had tested his will. Each morning, the old keeper greeted him with quiet words of wisdom and kind gestures. The keeper's presence was like the steady light of the lighthouse, unwavering and constant. It was as though the old man had been waiting for Cale's arrival, knowing that he, too, had a journey yet to complete. One afternoon, as Cale sat near the edge of the cliff, watching the horizon where the sea met the sky, the keeper approached him, his footsteps soft on the ground. "You've been thinking deeply, I can see," the keeper said. "What troubles your mind, young sailor?" Cale turned to face him, his expression thoughtful. "The storm, it felt so powerful. It took everything from me, and yet, I survived. But I still wonder, why was I the one who found the light? Why me?" The keeper smiled gently, sitting beside him. "The sea does not choose who it challenges, Cale. It is vast, and its storms are unpredictable. But it does choose to show us the way, if we are willing to see it. You were lost, yes. But you chose to follow the light. You did not give in to the darkness. That is why you found your way." Cale looked out at the endless expanse of water, his heart heavy with the weight of his past. He thought about his family, the friends he had lost along the way, and the dreams he had once held. "But how do I move forward now? How do I return to the world after all this has happened?" The keeper's gaze softened, his eyes filled with quiet understanding. "The world is full of storms, Cale. Some are fierce, some are gentle. But the most important lesson to learn is that even when the storm rages, there is always something you can hold on to. Something that keeps you steady. For you, that light, that beacon, is inside you. It has always been there. And now, you carry it with you." Cale took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace settle within him. The winds had not stopped, but their howling no longer seemed so frightening. The sea, though vast, no longer felt like an enemy. He had faced it, and he had survived. And now, he could go on. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Cale made a decision. He would continue his journey. Not just for the promise of adventure, but for the promise of finding his true purpose. He stood, looking at the lighthouse one last time. The light was as bright as ever, a steady reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope could guide you. "Thank you," Cale whispered to the keeper, who nodded in return, as if he had known all along. As Cale set sail once more, the sea seemed calmer, the winds gentler. The lighthouse faded into the distance behind him, but its light remained in his heart, a beacon to guide him through whatever storms lay ahead. He knew now that the journey was not just about reaching a destination, but about finding the strength to continue, no matter the obstacles. And as long as he carried the light within him, he would never truly be lost. Cale sailed onward, the stormy sea now a distant memory. With each passing wave, he grew stronger, his heart more certain. The light of hope, once a distant flicker in the dark, now shone brightly within him. And so, the story of the stormy sea and the lighthouse of hope came to an end, but Cale's journey was far from over. The sea was vast, and there would always be new storms to face. But with the light in his heart, Cale knew that no matter where he went, he would never be lost again. Weeks passed as Cale sailed across the open sea, the gentle rhythm of the waves beneath his ship now a familiar companion. The storms that once seemed so frightening had become just another challenge, something he could face without fear. The light of the lighthouse, though distant now, remained within him, guiding him with an unwavering glow. He had found his way, and he had learned that hope could weather any storm. But the sea, with its vastness and mystery, still had lessons to teach. One night, as Cale sailed under a sky full of stars, a sudden gust of wind caught his ship, pushing it off course. The sea, which had once been calm, began to churn and swell. A storm, fierce and unpredictable, was brewing once again. The wind howled like a wild animal, and the waves rose like mountains around him. Cale, gripped by a familiar sense of urgency, gripped the wheel of the ship. He could see the storm's fury in the distance, dark clouds rolling in, lightning flashing across the sky. His heart began to race. Would he survive this time? Was the light enough to guide him through such darkness? As the ship was tossed violently from side to side, Cale's thoughts turned once again to the lighthouse. The light had always been his guiding star, but now it felt so far away. The storm felt stronger than before, more merciless. He closed his eyes for a moment, remembering the keeper's words, "The light is always within you." But how could he find it now, in the heart of such chaos? In that moment of doubt, something inside him shifted. With a deep breath, Cale released his grip on the wheel for a moment. Instead of fighting the storm, he let go. He remembered the keeper's wisdom that even in the fiercest storm, the light was not something to chase, but something to trust. It was a part of him now. His heart, steady and calm, became his anchor. Slowly, Cale took control once more, but this time, he allowed the storm to be what it was. Instead of struggling against the wind, he guided his ship with ease, moving with the rhythm of the waves. He found that the storm, while powerful, could not take away his peace. It was still chaotic, still wild, but now Cale sailed through it with a quiet confidence. Hours passed, and the storm began to wane. The dark clouds parted, and the first light of dawn began to shine through. The sea, now calm again, stretched endlessly before him. Cale looked up at the sky, the rising sun painting the world in shades of gold and pink. He had made it through once again. But this time, something was different. He had not just survived the storm, he had embraced it. He had learned that true strength did not come from fighting the world around him, but from trusting the light within, even in the darkest moments. As the calm settled over the sea, Cale noticed something on the horizon, a small island, barely visible against the rising sun. He steered the ship toward it, curiosity stirring in his chest. This island, unlike any he had seen before, seemed to hold something mysterious, something that beckoned him to explore. As he drew closer, the island revealed its secrets. There were ancient ruins scattered along the shore, their stones worn by time. And in the center of the island stood a great tree, its branches stretching toward the sky, its roots deep in the earth. There was a sense of peace here, an ancient energy that seemed to hum in the air. Cale stepped onto the shore, his feet sinking into the soft sand. He felt drawn to the tree, its presence powerful and calming. As he approached it, he placed a hand on its trunk, feeling the strength of the earth beneath him. For a moment, it felt as though the tree itself was speaking to him, its ancient wisdom flowing into him. He closed his eyes, listening to the whispers of the wind through the leaves. And in that moment, Cale understood. The lighthouse, the storm, the calm, the light that guided him through it all had not been a destination or a single source. It was a journey, a part of the world, a part of him. It was the wisdom of the past, the hope of the future, and the strength to embrace the present. With a renewed sense of purpose, Cale knew that his journey was far from over. The sea still held many secrets, and the world was full of wonders waiting to be discovered. But now, he sailed not just for adventure, but for understanding of himself, of the world around him, and of the light that would always guide him. And so, as the sun rose higher in the sky, Cale set sail once more. The island slowly faded into the distance, but its lesson remained with him. The storm would come again. The seas would be rough, and the winds might howl. But he was no longer afraid. For Cale knew now that the light, the true light, was always within him. The stormy sea had given Cale more than he had ever expected. It had given him a sense of peace, a sense of purpose, and a newfound understanding of the world. And as the light of the lighthouse continued to shine in his heart, Cale knew that no matter what the future held, he would always have the courage to sail forward. As the days turned into weeks, Cale's ship sailed across many horizons. The sea, vast and unpredictable, had become his companion, and the winds, once fierce and threatening, now felt like gentle whispers, guiding him forward. He no longer feared the unknown. He embraced it. But Cale's heart still sought something more. One morning, as the sun rose in a burst of golden light, Cale saw something new on the horizon. A distant island, larger than the one he had discovered before, loomed in the distance. This island seemed different. It radiated a sense of mystery, as though it held something far more significant than anything Cale had encountered in his travels. His heart quickened with anticipation. He steered his ship toward the island, the wind at his back pushing him onward. As he approached, he could see towering cliffs, lush forests, and a valley that seemed to beckon him. When Cale finally stepped ashore, the air was thick with the scent of salt water and earth. The island was quiet, its only sounds the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds. As he walked through the dense forest, his footsteps soft on the moss-covered ground, he felt an unfamiliar presence. It was as if the island itself was watching him, waiting for him to uncover its secrets. After hours of wandering, Cale came to a clearing. In the center stood an ancient stone structure, partially overgrown with vines. The stones were worn, but they held a quiet strength, as though they had stood for centuries, untouched by time. As he approached the structure, Cale felt a sudden pull, a deep sense of recognition. He knew this place, though he could not explain how. It was as if his soul had been here before, long ago. The air seemed to hum with a gentle energy, and he reached out to touch one of the stones. The moment his fingers made contact, a low rumble echoed through the ground. The stones shifted, and the ancient structure began to open, revealing a hidden chamber inside. Cale stepped forward, his heart racing with excitement and wonder. Inside the chamber, the walls were lined with intricate carvings, depicting scenes of old heroes, battles, journeys, and moments of great change. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, and upon it lay a large crystal, glowing with a soft blue light. Cale approached the pedestal, feeling the energy of the crystal resonate within him. It was as if the crystal was calling to him, urging him to take it, to unlock the mysteries that lay within its depths. As Cale reached out and touched the crystal, a wave of light surged through the room, enveloping him. He felt his mind expand, his consciousness stretching out to the farthest corners of the world. He saw visions of lands he had never visited, of people he had never met, and of battles fought long before his time. The crystal showed him the path that lay ahead, the trials he would face, and the choices he would need to make. But more than that, the crystal revealed something even deeper: his true purpose. Cale had always known he was destined for something greater, but now he saw it clearly. He was not just a sailor, nor just a man wandering the seas. He was part of something much larger, something woven into the fabric of the world itself. The crystal's light faded, and Kale was left standing in the quiet chamber, his heart pounding. He knew now that his journey was not just about finding adventure, it was about discovering his true self. The stormy seas, the lighthouse, the island, and now this crystal, they were all pieces of a larger puzzle, and Kale was meant to be its key. As Kale stood in the chamber, a figure emerged from the shadows, a woman, tall and graceful, with eyes that seemed to hold the secrets of the world. She wore simple clothes, but her presence was undeniable. She stepped forward, her gaze meeting Kale's with a knowing look. "You have found it," she said softly. "The crystal, it has chosen you." Kale's voice trembled as he spoke. "Chosen me? What does it mean? What is my purpose?" The woman smiled, her eyes filled with ancient wisdom. "The storm you faced was not just a test of strength, Kale. It was a test of your heart. The light within you, the light of hope, is what will guide you in the trials to come. But you will not face them alone. The journey you are on is not just yours. There are others like you, others who have been called to the same path. Together, you will shape the future." Kale's heart swelled with a sense of wonder and excitement. He had known there was more to his journey, but now, standing before this mysterious woman, the weight of his destiny felt clearer. He was not alone. There were others, other souls who would walk with him through the darkness and the light. The woman extended her hand. "Come, Kale. There is much to learn, and time is short. The world is changing, and the storms are coming. But with the light of the crystal, you will have the strength to face whatever lies ahead." Kale took her hand, his resolve firm. He was ready to face the trials, ready to meet the companions who would join him on this journey. Together, they would discover what it truly meant to live with hope in their hearts, even in the face of the greatest storms. With the crystal in his possession and the mysterious woman by his side, Kale knew that his journey was just beginning. The stormy sea had taught him much, but it was the light within him, and the companions he would soon meet, that would guide him toward his true destiny. Kale's heart raced as he stood in the ancient chamber, the crystal's soft blue light still lingering in the air. The woman before him, whose presence was both calming and powerful, had given him the answers he sought, yet new questions began to form in his mind. "I am not alone?" Kale asked, the words heavy with wonder and fear. "You say others like me are on this path?" The woman nodded, her expression solemn. "Yes, Kale. There are others, heroes, seekers, chosen ones, each with their own piece of the puzzle. You will find them, but the journey will not be easy. The forces at work in the world are vast, and there are those who seek to use the light for their own purposes." Kale felt the weight of her words sink in. His journey was far from over, and the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. But one thing was clear: he was no longer walking alone. The thought gave him a renewed sense of purpose, as though his destiny was finally coming into focus. The woman's gaze softened. "I will help you find them. But first, you must prepare. The storm is coming, and it will test not just your strength, but your heart." Kale nodded, understanding. The storm that had once threatened to destroy him was not just a physical tempest, it was a test of who he truly was. And to face it, he needed to be ready, body and soul. With the crystal in hand, Kale set off with the woman, whose name he learned was Alira. She was a guardian of the island, a keeper of its ancient secrets, and she knew much about the trials that awaited them. Together, they traveled deeper into the island, where the terrain grew more rugged, the air thicker with mystery. Days passed as Kale trained, learning new skills and refining his connection with the crystal. It was not just an object of power, it was a guide, a conduit for the ancient wisdom of the world. Through it, Kale was able to tap into hidden reserves of strength and insight, unlocking abilities he had never dreamed possible. But the most important lesson Alira taught him was the power of unity. The light, she explained, is strongest when shared. Alone, the crystal's glow is faint, but when it joins with others, it becomes unstoppable. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the island, Kale stood at the edge of a cliff. The storm he had weathered felt distant now, a memory rather than a threat. Yet, in his heart, he knew the storm would return, more fierce than before. And when it did, he would need the strength of his companions. As if in answer to his thoughts, the wind shifted. A soft voice, barely a whisper, reached his ears. Kale. Turning, Kale saw a figure emerge from the trees, a man, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and piercing green eyes. His presence was commanding, yet there was a warmth to his gaze that put Kale at ease. "I've been waiting for you," the man said with a smile. "My name is Torin. The crystal has called me here." Kale felt a surge of recognition, as though he had known Torin for a long time, even though they had never met. The connection was immediate, deep, and unspoken. "I'm Kale," he said, extending his hand. "The crystal, it spoke to you too?" Torin nodded, taking Kale's hand firmly. "Yes. It led me here, to you. I've been searching for this moment, for this purpose. Together, we can face the darkness that is coming." And so, Kale and Torin stood side by side, knowing that their journey was just beginning. But they were not alone. As the days passed, more individuals arrived on the island, each drawn by the crystal's call. One was Lyra, a woman with silver hair and eyes like storm clouds, who carried a bow with unmatched skill. Another was Silas, a quiet, thoughtful man with a deep connection to the earth, able to commune with nature and manipulate the land itself. There was also Nia, a healer with a voice that could soothe the most troubled soul, and Eric, a former sailor who had been lost at sea but found his way to the island through a twist of fate. Together, they formed a fellowship, united by the crystal and the shared knowledge that they had been chosen for something greater than themselves. They were not just travelers, they were the protectors of the light, the bearers of hope in a world growing darker by the day. One evening, as they gathered around a fire beneath the stars, Kale spoke of his vision, the storm that was coming. The others nodded in agreement, their faces grim but resolute. "We are ready," Torin said, his voice steady. "We will face the storm together, as one." Kale looked around at his companions, each one strong in their own way, each one bringing something unique to their shared cause. For the first time since he had set out on his journey, Kale felt truly at peace. The storm would come, but with these companions by his side, he knew they could weather it. The storm was not just a force of nature, it was a test of the heart, a challenge to their will. But Kale and his companions were no longer alone. They had found each other, and in each other, they had found the strength to face whatever the storm would bring. The light, though flickering at times, would never go out. It burned brightest when shared, when nurtured by those who believed in it. And together, they would protect it. The days passed swiftly, and the tension in the air grew heavier. The island, once a place of calm and quiet, had begun to feel like the eye of a storm, calm for now, but ever aware that something darker was drawing nearer. Kale stood on the cliff's edge, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the storm clouds were beginning to gather once more. The winds had shifted, colder now, carrying with them an ominous warning. The group had spent weeks preparing for this moment, training, learning to harness the crystal's power, and strengthening the bonds between them. Yet even as they readied themselves, Kale could not shake the feeling that they were not prepared for what was to come. "We've trained long enough," Torin said from behind him, his voice low but steady. "But it's time to face what we've been preparing for." Kale turned to see his companions gathering on the shore, their faces resolute but filled with a quiet fear. Lyra, the sharpshooter, tightened the string on her bow, her eyes scanning the approaching storm. Silas, the earth mage, stood with his feet firmly planted on the ground, his hands glowing faintly with energy. Nia, the healer, kept her gaze focused ahead, her expression soft but filled with determination. Eric, the former sailor, stood at the forefront, his weathered face unshaken by the storm's approach. "I never imagined it would come to this," Cale said quietly. "But I know we can do this together. We're stronger than we realize," Lyra said with a slight smile, though her eyes betrayed her wariness. "When the storm hits, we fight. But we fight as one." As the winds picked up, the first heavy drops of rain began to fall, splashing against their faces and soaking their clothes. The crystal Cale carried pulsed softly, its light flickering with increasing intensity, as if responding to the gathering storm. "Stay close to me," Lyra's voice rang out, calm yet firm. She stepped forward, raising her hand toward the sky. "The storm is not just a force of nature, it is a manifestation of something far darker. We must not let it divide us." The sky above them darkened, the storm clouds swirling with unnatural force. Cale's heart pounded in his chest as he felt the tension in the air rise. He could almost hear a distant roar, as if the sea itself was crying out in anguish. And then, as the storm's full force descended upon them, a flash of lightning struck the ground just before them, sending a shockwave of energy through the island. The ground trembled beneath their feet as a deep, rumbling voice echoed from the heart of the storm. "You think you can stand against me?" The voice boomed, its tone filled with malice. "You are nothing but a flicker of light in the darkness. You cannot stop me." Cale's grip on the crystal tightened. He could feel its power coursing through him, and yet, it seemed so small in the face of the storm. But in that moment, he understood this was what the crystal had been leading him to. Not just the storm, but the darkness itself. "It's not about how small we are," Cale said, his voice steady. "It's about how much we believe. We have each other. And together, we are the light." With those words, the group sprang into action. Lyra drew her bow, sending arrows soaring into the storm, each one imbued with the light of the crystal. Silas raised his hands, the earth around him responding to his will as rocks and roots rose from the ground, forming shields against the barrage of wind and lightning. Nia's healing aura spread out like a warm glow, protecting them from the storm's worst effects, while Eric took charge of coordinating their defense, shouting commands and guiding them with his sailor's intuition. Cale stood at the center, the crystal raised high as he channeled its energy, focusing it through his own will. The storm raged around them, but they stood firm, united by a shared purpose. Each bolt of lightning that struck, each gust of wind that howled, was met with an equal force of light, of power, and of hope. "You cannot defeat what is already inside you," Lyra's voice whispered in Cale's mind. "The storm will test your resolve. But remember, your light will always shine brighter in the dark." As the battle raged on, Cale began to feel something deep within him shift. It was not just the crystal's power that guided him, it was the strength of his companions, the bonds they had formed, that fueled his resolve. They were not just fighting the storm, they were fighting for each other, for the light they carried within. The storm's fury grew more intense, and Cale felt the weight of the darkness pressing in on them. But with each passing moment, the light from the crystal grew brighter, more focused, as if it were feeding off their unity and determination. And then, in a final surge of energy, Cale lifted the crystal high into the air. The storm seemed to hesitate for a moment, as if it were acknowledging the power before it. With a mighty crack of thunder, the storm released one final, devastating blow. But as the lightning struck, the crystal flared with brilliant light, and the energy it released collided with the storm's heart. The clash was deafening, a blinding explosion of light and sound. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze, the world holding its breath. And then, as quickly as it had come, the storm began to dissipate. The winds died down, the lightning ceased, and the clouds began to break apart, revealing the first stars in the sky. They had done it. They had faced the storm and survived. Kale, breathless but alive, lowered the crystal. His companions, equally exhausted, gathered around him, their faces reflecting the same disbelief and triumph. "We did it," Nia said, her voice soft but full of wonder. "We're not finished yet," Kale replied, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "But we've taken the first step." The storm had tested them, pushed them to their limits. But through their unity, their strength, and the light within each of them, they had overcome it. And now, with the storm behind them, Kale knew that the true journey was just beginning. The darkness had not been defeated, but it had been driven back, if only for a time. As the stars sparkled above and the sound of the ocean calmed, Kale and his companions stood together, their resolve unbroken. For they knew that as long as they carried the light within them, no storm could ever truly defeat them. The night after the storm had passed was a quiet one. The moon, now shining bright, bathed the island in its silver glow. The storm had raged with incredible fury, but now, the world felt eerily still. Kale stood on the cliff's edge once more, his eyes staring out over the calm sea. It was hard to believe that just hours ago, the island had been consumed by a maelstrom of dark energy. The lighthouse behind him, though still standing, had suffered the storm's wrath. It was battered, its light flickering weakly, but it remained intact just as they had. "We made it through the storm," Torin said quietly as he joined Kale. "But this battle, it's only a part of something much bigger." Kale nodded, knowing that the victory over the storm had not solved the greater threat. The darkness they had felt was still there, hiding beneath the surface, waiting to strike again. And while they had fought bravely, Kale knew the enemy they faced was not something that could be defeated with just strength or light. "We've only taken the first step," Kale said, his voice soft but filled with resolve. "But the next step will be the hardest." As if on cue, the others began to gather around Kale. Lyra, her bow still slung over her shoulder, was the first to speak. "Kale, what now? The storm is over, but I can feel it, the darkness is still out there." "I know," Kale replied. "But now we know the true nature of our enemy. It's not just a storm. It's a force that feeds on fear, on doubt, on weakness." Silas stepped forward, his eyes scanning the horizon. "It's a force that wants to break us. But I believe together, we can stand against it. We've already proven that much." Nia smiled, her gentle demeanor never faltering. "We're not just fighting to survive. We're fighting for hope, for the light that still shines, no matter how dark things get." Eric, ever the strategist, crossed his arms and looked at the lighthouse. "It's not just about the crystal, either. The lighthouse was built to guide sailors through the darkest nights. We need to remember why we're here. We need to keep that light shining." Kale looked at each of them, feeling the weight of their words. His heart swelled with gratitude. These were the people he had come to trust, and together, they would face whatever lay ahead. But Kale also knew that in the depths of his heart, the real challenge was yet to come. "There's something else," Kale said, his voice growing serious. "The storm we just faced, it was only a glimpse of what's coming. A harbinger. There's a force at work behind the darkness, one that wants to take everything. It's more powerful than any storm, more dangerous than we realize. And we must stop it before it's too late." The group exchanged solemn glances, understanding that this fight was bigger than any of them had imagined. It was not just about surviving the storm or protecting the lighthouse anymore. It was about saving everything they held dear. What do we do now? Lyra asked. We need to journey to the heart of the darkness, Kale replied. There is a place, an ancient temple, where the true source of the storm lies. It is said that those who enter can either destroy the darkness or become part of it. You mean the temple in the mountains? Silas asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. Yes, Kale confirmed. The journey will be perilous, but I believe we can find a way to end this, once and for all. With a deep breath, Kale turned to face the group, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. We have to reach the temple. But the road will be treacherous. We may face more storms, more trials. But we will stand together. And so, with the storm behind them and the lighthouse at their backs, the group set out toward the mountains. They knew that what lay ahead was unknown, that the road would not be easy. But they also knew that as long as they stood together, they had a chance. The road to the temple was long and filled with uncertainty. The weather seemed to shift, as if in response to their mission. Clouds often rolled in unexpectedly, bringing fierce winds and torrential rains. But the group pressed on, determined to reach the temple and destroy the source of the storm. They had no choice. As they neared the foot of the mountains, they came upon a dense forest. The trees were twisted, their bark dark and gnarled, as if the forest itself was a part of the darkness they sought to destroy. Shadows seemed to move within the trees, and strange whispers echoed through the air. Kale could feel the weight of the magic in the air, a pressure that made it harder to breathe. This place, Nia murmured, her eyes wide with unease. It feels wrong. It's the darkness, Kale said softly. It's already trying to stop us. But we will not turn back. The group walked in silence, each step feeling like a battle against the growing tension. The deeper they went into the forest, the more intense the whispers became, until they felt as if the forest itself was closing in around them. Stay focused, Kale said, his voice steady. We'll make it through this. The temple is close. But even as he said the words, Kale felt a coldness settle deep within him, a gnawing fear that threatened to overtake him. Would they make it? Could they really defeat the darkness? The weight of the unknown hung heavy on his heart. The forest was now thick with a strange mist that clung to the ground like a living thing. The trees seemed to stretch higher than before, their branches twisting into unnatural shapes. The deeper they ventured, the more the air felt charged, as if the very earth beneath them was holding its breath. Kale stopped for a moment, his senses alert to the shift in the atmosphere. He could feel the darkness closing in, pressing against him like a physical weight. The whispers, now a constant murmur, seemed to come from all directions. Stay close, Kale ordered, his voice firm. The forest is alive with magic. We can't let it overwhelm us. Torin, his sword drawn and ready, nodded. We've faced worse. We'll make it through. But even as he spoke, the group felt the pull of the forest, the way it seemed to claw at their minds, trying to break their focus. The path ahead grew narrower, and the shadows seemed to grow more oppressive. We can't give in to it, Nia said quietly, her eyes scanning the dark trees. We must keep moving forward. Lyra, ever watchful, pulled an arrow from her quiver, her bow ready. The darkness feeds on fear. If we let it in, it'll be our undoing. Kale nodded in agreement. Then we have to be stronger than the fear it tries to plant in us. They pressed on, determined to reach the temple, though the journey felt endless. The mist seemed to grow thicker, and the air grew colder. Every now and then, a distant howl or strange, unearthly sound would echo through the trees, unsettling them all. But no one dared to stop. They couldn't afford to falter. Hours seemed to blend into one another as they trudged through the forest. At times, The whispers were so loud that Kale felt his head swim with confusion. Were they real? Or was it just the forest playing tricks on their minds? Then, just when it seemed that the darkness might consume them entirely, the path ahead opened into a small clearing. The air here was thick with magic, and in the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone altar, worn and weathered by time. "This is it," Kale murmured. "We've reached the temple's outer grounds." But even as he spoke, the ground beneath their feet trembled, and a deep, rumbling voice echoed from the depths of the earth. "You have trespassed, mortal fools," the voice boomed, its tone cold and filled with malice. "This place is sacred. You cannot stop the storm. You cannot stop the darkness." The group looked around in alarm, but the voice came from no single direction. It seemed to surround them, coming from the very earth itself. "Then we'll fight to the end," Kale said, his hand gripping his sword tightly. "We will not let you win." The voice laughed, a dark, echoing sound that seemed to reverberate in their very bones. "You are weak, bound by your own fears. You do not know what you face. But I will show you." Suddenly, the ground cracked open beneath them, and from the depths of the earth, shadowy tendrils shot up, wrapping around their legs and arms. The forest seemed to come alive, the trees reaching out as if to trap them. Kale gritted his teeth, struggling against the tendrils. "Hold fast," he shouted to his companions. "Don't let it take you." The others fought back, but the darkness was relentless. Each tendril seemed to sap their strength, their wills. The air grew colder, and Kale could feel the fear gnawing at him, whispering doubts into his mind. Was it possible to defeat this force? Could they truly stop the storm? Just as Kale was beginning to falter, he remembered the lighthouse. The light, the symbol of hope. It had been their guiding light through the storm, and it could guide them now. "The lighthouse," Kale whispered to himself, his resolve returning. "We fight for the light. We fight for hope." With renewed strength, he reached out to the others. "Focus on the light within you. Remember the beacon of hope we found. We can fight this darkness." The group, inspired by Kale's words, began to fight back with renewed vigor. They focused on the light inside them, the strength they had found in one another. Slowly, the tendrils began to recede, the darkness retreating in the face of their determination. But the voice continued, mocking them. "You cannot win. You are nothing. The darkness is eternal." Kale's heart pounded in his chest. But he could feel the light growing stronger, pushing back the darkness. The force that had held them captive was starting to weaken. Together, Kale shouted, his voice filled with conviction. "Together, we are stronger than this darkness. We will bring the light." With one final, united effort, the group focused their energy into a single burst of light, their combined willpower forcing the darkness to retreat. The tendrils shattered, and the forest fell silent. The voice was gone. The clearing was peaceful once more. Kale's chest heaved as he looked around at his companions. They were all panting, exhausted, but alive. They had done it. They had pushed back the darkness, for now. But Kale knew this was just the beginning. The true battle was still ahead, in the heart of the temple. They had won a small victory, but the war was far from over. As they approached the ancient temple, the very ground beneath their feet seemed to hum with power. The stone walls of the temple were carved with intricate symbols, their meanings lost to time. Yet, Kale could feel their significance. This place was old, older than anything they had encountered before. And it was here, in the heart of the temple, that they would find the source of the storm. The entrance was a massive archway, its surface worn by centuries of wind and rain. But the air around it crackled with energy. The darkness was not gone, it was here, waiting for them. "Are you ready?" Kale asked, his voice steady but laced with tension. He turned to face his companions. Lyra, her bow still gripped tightly, nodded. We've come this far. We can't stop now. Torin gave a grim smile. We've faced worse. We'll face it together. Nia placed a reassuring hand on Kale's shoulder. We will find the light. We've always found it. With a final glance at his friends, Kale stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the temple. The deeper they ventured, the darker the temple became. There were no torches here, no light. Only the faintest glow from their own determination illuminated the way. Strange, shadowy shapes seemed to move just beyond their sight, but every time they turned, there was nothing there. This place. It's alive, Silas murmured, his eyes darting to the corners of the room. We need to stay alert. The group pressed on, their footsteps echoing through the vast halls. The atmosphere grew heavier, and with each step, the whispers returned. They grew louder, more insistent. You cannot win, the voice boomed, echoing through the dark stone halls. You are nothing but pawns in a game you do not understand. Kale's hand tightened around his sword. We're not afraid of you. The voice laughed, its sound cold and mocking. You have no idea what you're facing. You are so insignificant. I am the storm. I am the darkness. And you will never escape me. As they reached the center of the temple, the ground shook, and the air was filled with a deafening roar. The shadows seemed to come alive, swirling around them, forming into monstrous shapes that towered over them. The group stood in formation, ready to face whatever came next. The first of the shadowy beasts lunged, but Kale was faster. With a swift motion, he drew his sword and struck the creature down, sending it dissipating into nothingness. But more appeared, each more formidable than the last. The air was thick with magic, and the walls of the temple seemed to pulse with energy. This is it, Kale said through gritted teeth. We have to break through. We can't let the darkness consume us. The group fought valiantly, each member of the party standing their ground against the monstrous shadows. Lyra's arrows flew with precision, striking down one beast after another. Torin's sword cleaved through the darkness with each swing, while Nia used her magic to create barriers of light, holding the shadows at bay. But no matter how many they defeated, more seemed to rise in their place. Kale's breath came in short gasps, his energy beginning to wane. He could feel the darkness creeping into his mind, trying to break his focus, to plant fear and doubt within him. Kale, focus, Silas shouted. Remember the lighthouse? Remember why we're here. Kale's eyes flashed with understanding. The lighthouse. It had always been their symbol of hope. The storm had come because of fear of the unknown, fear of the darkness. But the lighthouse had stood tall through it all, its light shining even in the darkest night. And now, Kale realized, it was their turn to be that light. The group had the strength to fight this, to push the darkness back, not because they were invincible, but because they had something worth fighting for. I am not afraid of you, Kale shouted, raising his sword high. We are the light, and we will not let you win. With that, Kale focused every ounce of his strength into the sword, channeling the light that had guided him from the very beginning. The sword glowed brighter and brighter, until it was a blinding beacon of light. The shadow beasts shrieked in agony as the light cut through them, sending them into nothingness. The darkness that had consumed the temple began to retreat, shrinking back into the depths from which it had emerged. But the voice, that cold, mocking voice, remained. You cannot destroy me, it hissed. I am eternal. Kale stood tall, his sword now blazing with pure light. Not if we stand together. And with that final rallying cry, the group surged forward, their combined strength lighting the way. The darkness was pushed back, piece by piece, until it was nothing more than a whisper in the wind. The storm had ended, but Kale knew that this battle, this victory, was just a chapter in a larger story. The storm had been defeated, but the world would always face darkness in some form. It was up to them, those who believed in the light, in hope to keep the flame alive. Cale turned to his companions, who stood by him, weary but triumphant. "We did it," Nia whispered, a smile spreading across her face. Cale nodded. "Yes, we did. And now, we keep going. The light must never fade." The storm had broken, but the skies were far from clear. A new uncertainty hung in the air, one that spoke of more challenges ahead. They had won the battle, but Cale knew, as did his friends, that this victory was merely the beginning of a much larger journey. "We've done it," Lyra said quietly, her voice breaking the heavy silence. "But what comes next?" Cale looked out across the vast, rolling sea before them, the lighthouse shining in the distance like a beacon of hope. It had stood tall through the darkest storms, and Cale knew it would continue to guide them forward. "We keep going," he said. His voice was firm, filled with resolve. "There are still others who need our help. There are still places where the darkness has not been banished. The lighthouse stands for hope, and we cannot let that light fade." Torin, ever the steadfast warrior, nodded. "The battle we just fought wasn't the last. It was just a test of our strength, our will, our unity." Nia's gentle voice joined in. "The light is always there. It's never truly gone. We just have to keep seeking it, keep holding onto it. As long as we do, we'll always find our way." Cale turned his gaze back to the horizon. The storm may have passed, but the world was still vast, and the road ahead was filled with unknowns. And yet, Cale felt a renewed sense of purpose. But peace, as they soon realized, was fragile. A week after their battle in the temple, the group arrived at a small coastal village. The villagers greeted them with gratitude, for their victory had restored the balance to the lands. However, there was a troubling undercurrent to the peaceful facade. One night, Cale was sitting by the sea, staring out at the horizon. The lighthouse still flickered in the distance, its steady light a constant reminder of their purpose. The soft sound of waves breaking against the shore was soothing, but there was something unsettling in the air. "Cale?" Lyra's voice brought him back to the present. "Something's not right here. The villagers are too calm. It's as if they've lost something. Hope, maybe." Cale frowned, looking at his friend. "What do you mean?" "There's a deep sadness in their eyes," Lyra continued, "and a quiet fear. It's not the storm we fought before. It's something else, something darker. They're afraid of what's coming. And I think they know more than they're letting on." Cale stood up, feeling a sense of foreboding gnaw at him. "We'll talk to them tomorrow. If something else is coming, we'll be ready." "We've heard of your victory," the elder said, his voice heavy with regret. "The storm is gone, but there are whispers of something darker. A force not born from nature, but from something older. Something that cannot be defeated by strength alone." Cale leaned forward. "What do you know about this force?" The elder sighed deeply. "Long ago, before even the first storm, there was a shadow that moved beneath the earth. It is not of this world, and it has been sleeping for centuries. But its awakening is inevitable. The storm you defeated, that was merely a sign. A herald of the coming of something far more dangerous." Nia gasped. "But why didn't you warn us?" The elder lowered his gaze. "We did not know the time was so near. The ancient texts speak of it, but they are fragmented. The force is connected to the very fabric of our world, a dark presence that has always lurked beneath. The lighthouse, the beacon you fought to protect, it is the only thing that can keep it at bay. But the balance is delicate." Cale stood, his hands clenched into fists. "How do we stop it?" The elder looked up at him, his eyes filled with sorrow. "You cannot destroy it, Cale. The only way to hold it back is to strengthen the light. The lighthouse. It must be renewed, its power must be reinvigorated. But the path to it is fraught with peril. There is a place, deep in the mountains, where the light must be infused with the essence of the stars themselves. Only then will the balance be restored. Torin spoke up. Then that's where we go. We don't have time to waste. The elder nodded slowly. I knew you would understand. But be warned, the journey is treacherous. The force you seek to prevent is ancient, and it will not go down without a fight. But Kale knew one thing for sure: the light would never fade as long as they held on to it. And no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. As the group traveled toward the distant mountains, Kale looked to the horizon once again. The lighthouse stood tall, its light flickering bravely against the darkness. He drew strength from its unwavering glow, knowing that as long as they kept moving forward, hope would always be there to guide them. That's the end of today's story. See you.